you and Carlton will look out for each other, won't you?
Oh, come on, absolutely, Viv. We got each other back.
Great, great, great. You two just be careful. There are a lot of sick, demented perverts out there.
Greetings, all.
Hello, Jazz.
I brought a gift for baby Dickie.
Nick.
Whatever. I know it's 5 months late, but I wanted to find just the right thing.
This is very sweet of you, Jazz. Thank you.
You know, Miss Banks, since you had that baby, there's something different about you.
Hi, I'm Daphne Maxwell Reid, and you're listening to Monday Morning Critic.
So I have to say, the girl who was raised in the Amsterdam housing projects has come a long way.
I guess.
You know, and when I look at your situation early on, I feel like your parents were really good about creating an environment where you could believe anything was possible. I know that sounds cheesy, but I feel like that's exactly what your house was like.
It was. It was. Anybody could do anything they wanted to do, and they did that by example and also by encouragement.
Oh, that's excellent. And Dad is a photographer, correct? Is that?
No, he was an amateur photographer. He liked to take pictures.
Yeah.
No, he was a soda jerk. He was making some of the best malteds around.
But you know, the creativity part, though, I mean, I granted you say amateur photographer, but you know what? I mean, you have a passion for something. It's a creative thing. It's related to the arts. You know, it might not have been his main profession, but it seemed like it was a passion he liked.
Yeah, and he shared it with his family because he got us cameras when we were young. And I have spent my entire life, I always had a camera, a sewing machine, and a computer.
Yeah, and one of the things I really wanted to ask you about was, you know, your high school, which is such an interesting kind of the scenario. You were class president, correct?
Yes.
Talk about the merit scholarship and what got you to that next level, right? Because I think Northwestern is such an interesting part of your life. But what
it's interesting too.
Yeah. But the high school part is really interesting because I feel like you were, you know, top of your class. You're doing a lot of these things that great students do. Talk a little about your high school experience and kind of how that maybe shaped you a bit.
Well, I think growing up in New York City, there were a lot of opportunities to be exposed to a lot of different cultural things.
Right.
And I was exposed to a lot of culture. I grew up across the street from where they built Lincoln Center. So I watched that happen.
Yeah.
I worked at Lincoln Center in the New York State Theater when I was in high school and saw the original West Side Story when it was a play before it was a movie that they shot in my neighborhood too. I've had exposure to a lot of the arts. I mean, I had the planetarium, the museums, Museum of Art, Natural History Museum. I always went to places because I was curious and had a whole structure of allowing me to be curious.
Right.
I had friends who were Jewish, so I went to synagogue. I had friends who were Catholic, so I went to a Catholic church. But I was raised in a Presbyterian church. But that church also was very involved in the community. So anything that was happening in New York, I was usually sticking my nose into. And on Saturdays, I would run down to the Lower East Side, and I was at the group theater workshop with Robert Hooks and Hattie Winston and a whole bunch of other folks, Douglas Turner Ward. We were down there creating neighborhood plays and doing all sorts of things at the Cherry Lane Theater. And that was my acting introduction.
Right.
They became the Negro Ensemble Company, and I went off to college knowing that there was no way that this little brown girl could make a living in that business. So why aim there? I was aiming toward becoming a teacher.
Yeah.
And I got a scholarship because I was probably one of the top students, but I went to a high school that you had to take a test to get into.
Wasn't it like a science high school, Daphne?
Bronx High School of Science.
Yeah,
and at the time, it was one of the top 5 high schools in the country.
Wow.
And I just always being curious. I was good at science. I hated algebra, so I was not good in math, but I was great at geometry and realized the geometry is spatial.
Right. Right.
So I could interpret things spatially. And one of the classes that I had at Bronx Science was in drafting. And I was drafting screw threads and things like that. I loved drafting.
Yeah.
So when I went to college, I had, because our high school class was graduated 958 students and 957 of them went to college. You could only apply to 3 colleges because that's all the counseling office could handle.
Right.
So you apply to a state school, and then you have 2 other choices. And I applied to Brandeis up in Boston, but I had already been to Boston. And there was a recruiter that came in from Northwestern, and I had never been to Chicago. So I said, oh, let me go there.
Mm, mm,
I
mm.
didn't know very much about Northwestern or its status in the community.
Right.
I just knew it was a good school. And that was a shock to my whole system when I got
Yeah.
there. But it was a great experience when you come all the way through it and you look back at it. It was a little difficult getting through. I didn't know that being Black was such a negative
Mm.
until I was greeted with potential roommate who said, "Oh, I'm not rooming with no niggers." I
Ugh.
said, "What? What? What are you talking? Where are
Oh.
they?" I mean, I didn't even know what she was talking about.
Right.
So that was my introduction to Northwestern, and it was opening up to the Jewish students and to Black students. And the class that I entered in '66, there were 36 Black students out of a population of 5,000. That's a real tiny
Wow.
number.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it was quite an experience, but I had enough self assurance. I had enough, I guess, of my parents instilling of me. I had enough ego and enough self confidence that it didn't bother me at all. I
Right.
just went through it, and I determined that anybody who thought differently or thought like my potential roommate thought were just unexposed, ignorant people. So once they were exposed, they would have a different change of mind. But I wasn't going to be the one who individually started exposing them. So I just went about my life and had a great one.
Yeah, yeah, and two things here quickly before we get into Northwestern. That's some powerful stuff you said. The first of which is, I think I know why you were a great student, right? It's not necessarily the really good students don't just get A's in class, right? They're not just reading or it's more than that. I think it's your curiosity. You mentioned going to temple, going to church, like that's those things that you are curious about. I think really supplement how bright of a person you are, right? It's not just the classroom stuff.
Correct.
It's outside that makes you a great student, right?
Correct. I'm always on a journey of curiosity. Even to this day, my joy is learning.
Yes.
And if you don't learn something new every day, you're getting shortchanged.
Yeah. And the other the other thing that struck me is when you were talking about some of the schools you applied to, Brandeis, which has a significant Jewish population for its student community. Do you think things would have went differently at Brandeis than they had at Northwestern as far as the
Oh,
because hatred, but not
oh,
ignorance? Yeah.
totally,
Yeah.
totally. Because they didn't have the kind of segregation on the East Coast, the Northeast,
Right.
that they had in the Midwest and the South.
Good
It
point.
was the '60s. They
Yeah.
were still coming out of a lot of turmoil, and it was a time of change, and I was part of that change and appreciate being part of that change. But being the first to do something is only significant in hindsight because one doesn't try to become the first to do something. One just does what one wants to do.
Right.
Oh, you happen to be the first person to do that. Okay. Hopefully, there's a lot more behind me.
Right, right. That's certainly the definition of a trailblazer for sure. When you look at there's some stories out of Northwestern. When you become homecoming queen, and the girl who won it before you has like 3 pages written in the newspaper. You have absolutely nothing, and Jet Magazine kind of pops in to reward you for that, which is phenomenal. But before that happens, can you feel the burden as it's unfolding? Is it difficult to move forward, Daphne? Right, because you're experiencing this hate, like, and it's certainly not on your end. It's the ignorance of others, but still, you have to carry some of that on your shoulders. I mean, you have to deal with it every day. Did it bother you at any point?
No,
No.
no, it was insulting
Yeah.
when the president crowned me and just looked at me and said, "I just have to hold this here till they take pictures," and turned around and walked away.
Yeah.
Um, it was the yearbook that had done 3 pages on the homecoming
The
queen, and
yearbook. Okay.
when when I asked the yearbook why my name was not even in the yearbook the
Yeah.
year that I was homecoming queen, they said, "Oh, it wasn't important this year." I said, "I will remember that."
Mm,
And I
mm,
did for 40 years.
yeah. Yeah. Is that where Jet Magazine stepped in there? Right?
No,
Am
no,
I off a little bit?
they were there initially. They were there when
Oh,
I
I
was
got you.
crowned.
Okay.
They were there to celebrate that I was a homecoming queen and I happened to be Black. The Amsterdam News was there. My community recognized it, but the community of the university and that city did not recognize.
That's so embarrassing because everybody picks up on this monumental occasion except for the one of student body that should have picked up on it, right?
Yeah,
That's yeah. Um,
I got a
and
back.
he certainly did. So is there ever, and I don't want to say regret, is there any, did you wish you had done it differently, or do you think everything you've learned has contributed to who you are today?
Period.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well said. Well said. What do you think you took away from your time? I mean, you took many things away, but if somebody said to you, like if I say, okay, what's the one thing you took away from your experience at Northwestern? If you had to narrow it down to one, I'm sure there's many. But if I said, give me one thing, Daphne, that you brought with you forward into life, into your experiences, what would that have been?
My son.
Oh,
I
that's great.
married the college football player, and I had a son who is a
Mm,
magnificent creature.
mm. And
I take nothing away from Northwestern. It was a beautiful campus. It has now recognized me and treats me very well. And I have served on its board, but I punished them for quite a while. I said, "No, you'll not get anything from me until you give me an apology."
yeah,
And
yeah,
they finally did. And it's been fine. I think the university is still trying hard to be salient, but it is still a great university, and I still support certain facets of the university.
right. And progress, I suppose, as slow as it is sometimes, at least you're seeing change. We're seeing
I see
change.
change. Yeah.
That's right. That's a good thing. But firsts are not new to you, right? So we talk about Glamour magazine. I mean, all these wonderful things are happening. What's your mindset at this point, Daphne? Can you realize how important I mean, you earlier,
No,
yeah, but
was
they're
a
huge.
lark. It was a total lark.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a model because my junior high English teacher sent a picture to somebody he knew at 17 magazine, and they featured me in something called the Real Girl issue my freshman year. And I leaned forward, saw the picture, and asked me to sign with her. I said, "Oh, sure, okay." They were going to pay me to smile. I know how to smile. So I'm living quite the life of Riley.
Yeah.
I'm in love with the football guy. I'm traveling back and forth between Chicago and New York. And to make everybody feel bad, it was on a United Airlines fare. Round trip Chicago to New York was $25.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
So I was going back and forth and staying in school and being in love.
And you're modeling this whole time. I don't think I mentioned that. You're
Modeling.
modeling. Yeah, this
That's
whole
what I was
time.
doing in New
Yeah.
York. Yeah.
Yeah. And you learned to become an actor well, you had a little you were dabbling in it a little bit, but Chicago
Oh,
is where you become an actor, right? That's your first job, I think, as a was it a commercial for
for
laundry detergent?
Phoenix
Cheers?
towels.
Oh, I thought
Oh,
it
Phoenix,
was I thought it was Cheer. Was it the laundry detergent? Is it Cheer? Is that what it's
No,
called?
Cheer was what got me to LA, but my
Oh, okay,
first
okay.
commercial was Kleenex towels,
Yeah.
and I was feeding a baby food and got splatted in the head with baby food, and that was my first national commercial, and really the first commercial that I had done and got me into Screen Actors Guild, and I was modeling when I graduated from college. I was modeling in Chicago,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's where I was doing commercials and print work and catalog work and voiceovers, which I found out was a wonderful thing to do because you roll out of bed and you don't have to get beautiful to do a voiceover.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And talk about the because my dad and I love your work. We do love the work of I have to tell you uh Downtown Brown and Venus Flytrap. I'm old enough. I'm almost 50, so I grew up on this, and I've enamored with this man. I'm enamored with you, and what a power couple you are. And before we talk a little bit about him, I just wanted to say there are lots of people that talk about charitable work, right, Daphne? I feel like you and your husband put your money where your mouth is, right? Not a lot of people do that, right? You've done it
we
your whole life.
try to help where we can according to the things that interest us. Mine is in the arts and supporting artists and being supported as an artist. I
Mm,
know the value of being recognized as an artist. And my husband, who is now Tim Reed, he's my second husband.
hmm.
Um, he is interested in filmmaking and he trains filmmakers, and he has an institute called the Legacy Media Institute. And he's always trying to assist to make sure that filmmakers understand the responsibility of the images that they're creating, because there's power in those images, and one has to live with oneself, with what one creates.
Right.
Never goes away.
No, no. And I think a good example of this is you mentioned that, but you guys developed New Millennium Studios, which you sold in 2015. But I don't believe that's I think that was a lot with tax credits. I think you were just in the wrong state. I think if you were in Georgia, things would have been significantly different. Is that correct, Daphne?
Yes, the legislature in Georgia understood tax credits,
They
and
got it.
the legislature in Virginia did not. And so our clients would all kind of bail. They'd go to Toronto and Georgia and North Carolina and everywhere where they had tax credits, and we couldn't get our legislature to do that. So after, I guess we struggled at it for about 16 years and then said, okay, this isn't working.
Yeah.
It's time to move on. But we had some great times there. We did
Yeah.
a television series called Links for Showtime for 2
Right.
years there.
And Spielberg coming by doesn't hurt, and
Yeah,
Lincoln doesn't hurt.
yeah,
That's pretty
come
good
by,
too.
cute little scene.
But that's what I'm talking about. Like you still impacted, like you stuck through it. You could have bailed a lot earlier. It's certainly not your fault. I mean, it's not a product of something you guys did, but you still hung in there. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like you put your money where your mouth is.
We tried.
That's an example of philanthropist, through and through. So when you guys when this kind of unfolds, does it hurt a little bit to move on from that? Did you feel like there was, because your husband's still doing work related to that? You're doing, I mean, you're an artist, you're very fashion orientated. Moving on from that, what was that like? And I'm not trying to beat
It
a
was
dead horse.
painful.
Yeah,
It's hard
yeah,
to do when
yeah.
you've sunk millions of dollars into a project and then you just say, okay, throw your hands up and walk away. It
Mm,
was painful. And it took a couple of years to get past the pain, but you get past it by moving on. You don't get past it if you sit and wallow in it.
right.
So just move on.
Yeah.
We were both healthy, so we just keep on going.
Yes, and you did keep on going, and you are keeping on going. I mean, just to rattle off some of what you have, Harriet, which was great, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, a show that I absolutely love that your husband is a part of too, is Simon and Simon. And I bring this up every show, Daphne. My listeners probably get sick of this, but I'm sorry. The theme music and a lot of the work that you and your husband were in, it's almost like today we have so much streaming that they forget there's a musical intro. It's very brief if there is. But look at Simon and Simon, how catchy it was. Hill Street Blues, The Fall Guy, all part of your filmography. Those are legendary intros, legendary shows. I mean, I
I
grew up
think
on it.
the most legendary one is Frank's Place
Great show.
because
Yeah.
and Snoop's. Snoop's, we
Mhm.
had Ray Charles sing our opening.
He's pretty famous,
And
right?
excuse me?
He's pretty famous, right? Ray Charles.
That
He had a
guy.
little bit of a
Yeah, that guy. Yeah, he
yeah.
sang our theme song.
Wow.
Lucky Are We.
Wow.
And in Frank's Place, we had Satchmo did our opening. So hey, we got some great music to our stuff.
And a show like Frank's Place, I feel like had so much more life in it. I mean, it's like it was such a great show to watch. It's like,
Yes.
I mean, like there's shows that go on forever. I'm like, why is this show still playing? And then there's shows that have so much juice left in them, and it's like things are cut short. I don't, for the life of me, I'll never understand that, Daphne, ever.
It was political.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
So we have to talk about this, and I've seen so many of your interviews. You're so kind to people. You treat people with respect. Every interview you treat the person the same way. It's just very noble of you. I have to say, so for those listening, you split the role of Aunt Viv with Janet Hubert. For the two of you played the same that role. Is it, when that happens, do you feel like when you assume that role, do you want to hold on to some of what she did? Do you want to create something, excuse the pun, fresh for for bring your own take to it? How is that picking up a character? Because it's not every day that I talk to somebody that's a huge part of a legendary character. So what's your mentality when you get that role? Is it, I'm going to bring what I can do to this, and I can't really worry about anything else?
I don't have the talents that Janet had.
Hmm.
I cannot be Janet. There's no need to try to be Janet.
Right.
I could only bring me to that character. And for me, I didn't know what the situation was. I just knew they called and asked me to audition. I auditioned. I got a job. I was welcomed there like I had been there the entire time. I had no idea what had happened before. I asked once and they said, "We don't talk about it." I said, "Done.
Fair
I'm over
enough.
it."
Yep. And when you get that call, you must be blown away. That's a great opportunity, right? On what is probably the most successful show on television at the time.
Well, at the time, you didn't know it was such a successful show. I was asked to audition for it when it first started.
Right.
And they presented it as a half-hour comedy with a rap star. And I said, "I'll pass." So I didn't audition. And then I saw the show on television. I said, "What a cute show that is. Yeah, good for them."
Yeah.
And they called 3 years later and asked me to come audition for the role. And I said, "But you already have an Aunt Viv." And they said, "Would you like to audition for the role?" And I said, "Sure." So I was lucky enough to get it.
What's your take on the fans' reaction of the way they've embraced you, whether it's at Comic Cons or seeing somebody on the street or interviews? Does it ever become overwhelming for you, Daphne?
No, it is so heartwarming.
Yeah.
And what
Yeah.
I really get a thrill out of is because of its iconic nature, we're on our third generation of fans.
That's right.
We get grandchildren who say, "Oh, Aunt Viv." I love to hear it.
Yeah. And I was watching an interview you did in Chicago. You were on it was a news network. And the woman that was interviewing you, it was a man and woman. She called you Aunt Viv during the whole interview, and you were so cool with it. Like, I don't know. I just think that's that's a
Whatever.
telling. Yeah, absolutely. Is James Avery the great guy I think he is?
Yes, and more.
Yes.
And more. Wonderful, wonderful human being. Man, I loved dearly. Yeah.
And when it comes to him, there's a great story where there's the scene where Will is confiding him how he feels because his dad's abandoned him a second time. I mean, you talk about an iconic scene in the show, right? People just weep to this day when they watch it. But when he
Including
yeah, and when he whispers to Will, I guess when the cameras were panning away, that my friend is wonderful acting or something to that effect.
now
Boy,
that's acting. That's
that's acting. Yeah,
that's
it's just, I don't know. It's just, there's so much to this show.
yeah.
We talk about Fresh Prince and why it resonates, right? Because when you first read the synopsis, right, a rapper and this and that, and we know it's so much more deeper than that. Why do you think it resonates to three generations? I mean, now we're looking at the reboot as well, right? Which you were on, but why do you?
Not a reboot.
Not a reboot. Well,
Reimagining.
reimagining. You're right. So what is it? Why do you think? I mean, and it's
I
kids.
tell you what I think.
Okay.
I think that a fish out of water story is universal. I also think that because of the way they crafted each of our characters, we came at each situation from a different viewpoint.
Mm,
And in
mm,
a family that is comprised of that many viewpoints, you get a universal picture. And it could be acceptable to many cultures, but we made sure that it also embraced our culture, kind of specifically. We were able with the writers to change some things that we didn't think were culturally relevant. And for one example, we had a script, and little Ashley was supposed to back talk to her father and sass him. And we just said, no, no, she wouldn't have any teeth. You just don't do that. So we were able to impart that kind of cultural acuity to all of the things that they were writing. And it made it so that we could, with great integrity, perform these wonderful words that they wrote in these great situations, and have fun. Will
mm,
Smith is an amazing person
mm,
and
mm,
worked harder than anybody I've ever seen. And he also was very consistently working both the show and the business side of show business. He
mm.
was very adept at understanding how the system works and how he can progress through the system. And I just thought that was wonderful growth to see through the 3 years that I shared with him.
Yeah, and to add to what the wonderful words that you just said, I feel like you said it earlier. I think a show like this, I feel like it hits. I mean, there are kids that were raised in single parent homes or maybe didn't have a family. When they turned on the Fresh Prince, this was their family. White, black, brown, anything in the middle, that was their family.
Yes.
And those are the shows that are so endearing. When you hear the words like America's Mom, and like it's just all that stuff together, Daphne, it almost chokes me up now as I'm speaking with you. It's very in depth, and it's like I feel, and I don't want to be overly dramatic. I feel
It's
like we've
been a
lost.
joy for me. It has been
Yes.
a joy. I have been so blessed with wonderful, wonderful opportunities that I've been able to take advantage of because I have tenacity
Mm-hmm.
and because I understand human nature and because I'm a nice guy. So I've had great opportunities and lots of blessings.
Yeah, and you're still doing some amazing work. And I wanted to ask you, as recently as Harriet, I know that you love. I mean, that movie is stunning. The way it looks, the
Stunning.
way it plays. It's one of those movies, and I say this quote a lot. And people are like, "Oh, shut up with this," but it's true. You could turn the volume off on that movie and watch it, and just appreciate the artistic cinematography. Right?
Yes.
You know.
I had the honor of being part of that cast,
Yeah.
and I felt honored because it was produced by a Black woman. It was
Mm,
directed by a Black woman. It
mm.
starred a beautiful Black woman. Cynthia Erivo is one of the most talented individuals I've ever met.
Amazing. Amazing.
And I was just on. They said, "Oh, you only have one line." I said, "I don't care. I want to be in it. I want to play."
Yeah, yeah,
Was a great, great experience. I just and the designer, the clothing designers was a Black man. I mean,
right.
it was just all such a warm community of us telling our own story, which is what I've been trying to do, what Tim has always been trying to do, telling our own stories with our own cultural bent to it.
Mhm.
And it's an amazing way to work.
A great movie, great movie. I'll end the interview with this, and thank you so much for all this time and for sticking with me. And
Oh, thank you for your patience in this crazy day.
so I have to ask you this, and I don't know. You could say whatever you want. You could say nothing. So obviously, we talk about how talented Will is. Obviously, there was the fiasco at the Oscars. Chris Rock, another talented human being that was also on Fresh Prince. But how do so? Here's my take on it. You tell me if you agree or disagree. I feel like we are in a hurry many times in society, there are things that are unforgivable. The Harvey Weinsteins in the world, unforgivable. But then we have the things that are words that maybe could be forgiven, acts that could be forgiven. But as a society, we're in such a hurry to banish people and get rid of them. You've messed up, you're done for good. I was angry when I first saw this originally. I was like, boy, that's just a really, and it's obviously not a good thing on any level. But as it wears away, as time goes by, I almost feel like, where's the forgiveness we've been talking about as a society? Like, it's a horrible thing, but it's like, yeah, we're not going to just like, is this what we're going to do? We're just going to do away with him. We're just going to treat him like he's, I don't know. What's your take on it? I mean, you're much more in depth of a thinker than I am for sure. What's your take on Will, the Academy, the entire situation? Say whatever you're comfortable with, Daphne.
My take is it is family business,
Yeah.
and I leave it at that.
Well said. Well said. And I really, as an actor, his work has changed my life with some of the stuff he's done. I mean, even the
Brilliant.
movie, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. I would be remiss if I left the interview by not talking about your artwork, your fashion. That is still going strong. Say anything you want about that. I have your website. Did you make that?
These are my doors that I take pictures of around the world. And I took them and I made a fabric. I designed the fabric, I made the fabric, and then I constructed these wonderful tote bags.
Whoa. And those are really well made.
Oh yeah, and it's got my little signature inside. Oh, let me see if I can get that picture.
Daphne, do you sew that, or is that
I
done like
sew them. I make everything.
wow. Now
And I
people
made this coat. I mean, I still make these and sell them.
You're no
Make
joke.
toppers.
Wow.
I make the
Jesus.
coat I have on.
So how long does it take to make like the coat you're wearing and the one you just showed me in the red? How long does that take?
About 5 hours.
That's it?
Uh-huh.
Wow. That looks like something that like you go to the store and it's like it'd be priced off. It's like ridiculously priced. That is like really well
Not
made.
too ridiculously priced. I mean, I'm pretty reasonable.
No, I'm saying like that's
Custom-made goods.
yeah. I mean, so people can where can people get this? Can they get it on the website that I
On the
have?
website, yeah.
Okay, right on top there. And do you find are you still going strong with the acting? I saw you have a few things in pre-production. You have this, post-production, I should say. Is it tough to maintain that balance, Daphne?
No,
No.
no, it gets busier sometimes than others, but no, it's a joy. Everything I do at this point in my life brings me joy, or I don't do it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's really, really well said. And I have to say one quick thing before I let you go. I did want to say how much, and I think I said this before, the way you and your husband have affected lives. Just he is such a great man, and I mean, not that I'm telling you your husband's a good man. Like, oh, it's like the first time you've heard it. But no, I just the
He's
two
a
of you.
pretty good guy. Pretty
The,
good guy.
I will leave by saying the two of you are one hell of a team.
Ah,
So thank you for that, Daphne, and thank you for the time you've given me, and loved speaking with you today. And thank you for all the work and all the lives you've changed with your work.
my pleasure, and thank you for being there to see all this stuff, Derek.
Yeah.